Namaste. Today we're going to discuss Bhagavad Gita. In our words, it means the Song of God or Song of the Blessed One. Before we proceed, I hope all of us have already liked and subscribed the channel and also have clicked the notification bell so it would tell you if a new video is uploaded that hopes to help you with understanding the different literatures of the world. So you see, Bhagavad Gita is special, although it is not a very easy reading, as when you read it, it would give you a good glimpse why a person should never give up, and why even if a task is against one's idea, one must do it if it is a duty. As we put it in our own words, comply first before complaining. Reading Bhagavad Gita somehow made me realize that the religions in the world are not at all that different. They have reverence to a God, and that God is omniscient and loving and merciful. I hope as we discuss the Bhagavad Gita, you would get to have a glimpse of how beautiful literatures are and how much it shows us of how to become a better person if we only choose to. To begin with, let's have a background on Hindu texts. Basically, there are two major groupings of texts in the Hindu tradition. One is the Shruti and Smriti. Shruti means that which is heard. It encompasses the most sacred of Hindu texts, including the Vedas, or scriptures containing hymns, liturgical material, myths, prayers, and guidance about ritual. And the other one is the Upanishads. The Upanishads is the fourth section of the Vedas that contain commentary and philosophical inquiry. These texts are considered to have been handed down or heard by the great sages, and it comprise the basis of most Hindu philosophy. So you see, as we discuss our Mahabharata, we would get to understand another culture better. The other Hindu text, or the other grouping of the Hindu text, is the Smriti. It means that which is remembered, and it is comprised of Hindu literature passed down in the memories of ordinary people. Like our epics, it is passed down from generation to the next. It means it's an oral tradition. Although considered less sacred than their Shruti counterparts, Smriti texts are more influential in modern practices of Hinduism. Somehow this idea would tell us that indeed our literature would reflect what we believe and what we fight for. Epics such as the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, these are the epic poem of India composed after or around 300 BC, they are considered Smriti. They are stories with religious and philosophical importance that expound and exemplify the basic philosophies laid out on Shruti texts. So again, as we discuss this one, we would get to understand another culture better, and with that, hoping we would become a better individual as we read or as we get to understand them and appreciate them. Being a part of the great epic Mahabharata, it is but right that we give you a brief background of Mahabharata yet. In the introduction written by Juan Mascaro in 1965 as part of his Himalayas of the Soul, he had written that the Bhagavad Gita was included in the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata is a vast epic of over 100,000 slokas or couplets and is the longest epic poem in the world, about 30 times as long as Paradise Lost, that is Milton's, and about 140 times as long as the Bhagavad Gita. About four-fifths of the poems are stories, and these are centered around the main story, which is the story of the war. If you would remember, for example, our Iliad, it was also somehow like that. It has a sub-story within a story, only that the main The main focus is the Trojan War. The word Mahabharata, meaning the great Bharata, reminds us of Bharata, the son of Sakuntala, the founder of a dynasty of Indian kings. This story is told in the Mahabharata and was used by Kalidasa in his great drama Sakuntala, the masterpiece of Indian poetry. Written in Sanskrit around 1st and 2nd century CE, Bhagavad Gita is considered one of the treasures and the guiding principles of Hinduism. This epic poem is the first translated work from Sanskrit. Imagine, the Bhagavad Gita is the first translated work from Sanskrit, which was done by Charles Wilkins in 1785. Later on, as obliged to stay in Paris due to the war. Can you imagine? There are a lot of things that are created in war. Perhaps because the human soul would always want to look for something that is beautiful, something that is hopeful. So let's continue. Alexander Hamilton taught Sanskrit to Friedrich von Schlegel, the great German critic, who with romantic enthusiasm spread the knowledge of Sanskrit in Germany. His brother, August von Schlegel, translated Bhagavad Gita into Latin. These translations, of course, have led to the comparative study of languages, which laid the foundation and the kinship of Sanskrit, Persian, Greek, and Latin, as well as Celtic, Germanic, and Slavonic languages coming from the primitive unwritten language called Aryan. From Ireland to India throughout Europe and America, Aryan languages are spoken until today. Now that we know that Bhagavad Gita is a part of the Mahabharata, let us put our attention into our work, the Bhagavad Gita. As mentioned, it is a Sanskrit term that translates as the Song of God or Song of the Blessed One. It basically constitutes a small part of the epic known as the Mahabharata, which of course I have mentioned earlier, or the great epic of the Bharata dynasty. Well, the Bhagavad Gita makes up 700 of the 100,000 slokas. Like the Gita, the composition of the Mahabharata is often attributed to the sage Vyasa, even though the epic was written and compiled over centuries. Of course, because it is an oral tradition, so we compile it century to century. Can you imagine the vast and the rich culture that is included in that collection? So the extensive scholarship dates the work in its present form from around 400 CE. The Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue between Krishna, the Lord Yoga, and Arjuna, the reluctant warrior, wherein Krishna explains the nature of the self, divinity, and the universe. In this explanation, Krishna discusses many critical ideas, some of which are central to his teachings. So now you see that Bhagavad Gita is not just a plain epic, not just a plain story. Instead, it would introduce us to the belief of the Hinduism, one of the greatest religions of the world. With this Bhagavad Gita, again it is hoped that we get to understand one another, and by so doing, we get to respect one another. Let us continue. The main story of the Mahabharata centers around forces of good and evil, represented on the whole as the Pandavas and the Kauravas. So you see, it's like the Iliad. Again, as mentioned earlier, it has a story within a story, but the highlight basically is the war between two clans, which are by nature relatives, because their parents or their fathers in particular were half brothers. The father of Dhritarashtra and Pandu was the king of Hastinapura, about 50 miles northeast of modern Delhi. So Dhritarashtra and Pandu were the parents of the two clans. The group or the clan of the Pandava is headed by Arjuna, the young prince or the Hindu warrior, and then Dhritarashtra has the Kauravas with him. While the father of Pandu and Dhritarashtra was called to join or to be in heaven, Pandu succeeded to the throne because Dhritarashtra was blind. The son of Pandu were Yudhishthira, Bhima, Arjuna, the young prince, the young warrior, with whom Krishna would be discussing his vast love for the universe, Nakula and Sahadeva. We will find their names in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Dhritarashtra had 100 sons. Compare that to the 5 sons of Pandu. The eldest son of Dhritarashtra was Duryodhana, literally means the incarnation of evil. Can you imagine that? An evil reincarnate. So perhaps he is filled with envy, he is filled with anger. The name itself would suggest that he would create some sort of mischief. So when Pandu died, it was Dhritarashtra who was named as the king. But as he is blind, he brought up in his place the 5 sons of his brother. The Pandavas became great warriors, and Dhritarashtra appointed the eldest, Yudhishthira, as heir apparent. This, of course, caused some strife between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. You know that Duryodhana, the incarnation of evil, will be very angry because having his father, Dhritarashtra, as his Dhritarashtra rather, as his father or as the king, it would tell him that he should have been the heir apparent. But then his father had named Yudhishthira as the heir apparent instead. This move would cause a great rivalry between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, and in the end, it would lead into a very great war. As you can see, all throughout, we would know that the Mahabharata would describe the physical battle of the Pandavas and the Kauravas. But if one wants to understand the spiritual meaning of Bhagavad Gita, which is a part of Mahabharata, one had better forget everything concerning the great battle of the Mahabharata or the story of Krishna and Arjuna in the vast epic. A spiritual reader of the Bhagavad Gita will find in it the great spiritual struggle of a human soul. The war imagery is used by Krishna in the poem when at the end of the chapter 3 he says, "Be a warrior and kill desire, the powerful enemy of the soul." We know with this line of Krishna, we are already told to purge our soul, to let go of desire. Because when we desire, we have envy, we have pride. No? So he said that it has to be killed. And then again at the end of chapter 4, he said, "Kill therefore with the sword of wisdom the doubt born of ignorance that lies in thy heart." So you see, asking, knowing is not bad. We have to ask to know what is truth. And when asked, we should always tell the truth. Sometimes we say truth hurts, but in the end, we know that it is only truth that can save us. It is only when we tell the truth that one could help us. When we keep on telling lies, in the end, we believe that lies ourselves. And then he said, How could the treachery, robbery, and butchery of war be reconciled with the spiritual vision and love of the Bhagavad Gita? How could we reconcile it with the spirit of Gita and all the true spiritual seers as expressed in those words of Krishna? Then Krishna said, when one sees that the God in himself is the same God in all that is, he hurts not himself by hurting others. Then he goes to the highest path. So you see, when we realize that the God in himself is the same God in all that there is, we would be told, like the Christians, we will be told that we are a splitting image of God himself. That is why we shouldn't do unto others what we don't want others to do unto us. And at the same time, when we hurt others, we are also hurting God. And therefore, by knowing all this, Krishna said, we refuse to hurt others. We choose to be at peace with everyone at all cost. I know it sounds impossible, but perhaps that is why when we do this, we go to the highest path. As we hear the overview of Mahabharata, it might help if we get to know also the key words or the key terms in our Bhagavad Gita, in particular, in Mahabharata in general. We have our Dharma. In Sanskrit, it means duty. It refers also to one's purpose or part in life. Example, what is your Dharma as a student? In this pandemic time where everyone is at crisis, what is your main duty as a student? And then we have our equanimity. It is a mental calm or composure, especially in a stressful situation. Isn't this perfectly said? Life now is so mentally, physically stressful. So our equanimity asks us to be calm, to be composed, to be of control to our reactions. And then another term is guna. It means one of the three qualities of the natural world. We will discuss guna more as we go into the different parts of our Bhagavad Gita. Then we have our karma. Usually we would say that karma is something bad. So we would say in Bisaya, aga ba, mabuti nga sa kanya in Tagalog and all that. But in Sanskrit, karma is a word for action or the sum of a person's actions. So you see, there is a good karma and there is a bad karma. If you do good, you get good karma. If you do bad, then you get bad karma. We have our karma yoga. It means the yoga of selfless action. This is the first type of yoga. I think it's very challenging to be selfless, especially now in the current world that we are living. This is a great challenge. Then we have myriad. It means countless, incredibly large. And then we also have our non-attachment. It means no reaction to the negative or positive outcomes of an action. It's like taking action as it is. In other words, you don't take it personal. It's just an action. So you appreciate perhaps that it's there, or I don't know, but it says it's really no reaction. It's like acknowledging that it is there, but then you don't have to be so angry, you don't have to be so happy, you just have to have composure. And then the rajas or the rahas, one of the three gunas, it represents passion and ego. Ego would never leave men and women. And then we have the renunciation. It is the act of giving up or rejecting something. We renounce the worldly things. We let go. And then we have our sannyasa. It is a Sanskrit word for renunciation, not regarding the fruit of action. So it's like not necessarily passive perhaps, but just being calm, composed, thinking and praying of what should be the next thing to do. Then we have our sattva, one of the three gunas. This is the third guna. It represents virtue and goodness. If ego and passion is present in anybody, then our virtue and goodness is also present in everybody. As Confucius would tell it, we humans are by nature good. And then we have our tamas, one of the three gunas representing inaction, lethargy, and ignorance. No, so we were told earlier that there were three gunas. So ignorance, inaction. So it's not because you would become, it would mean you would not act. And therefore, with our tamas, we are to be educated. We cannot live in ignorance. We cannot just have inaction. If we see something that is good, perhaps we could appreciate it. If there is something that is bad, we should also do something about it. And then we have unmanifest. It is the conceptualization of the divine without form. It's like a spirit, perhaps, no? It's like a spirit. It doesn't have a form. It does not conform with the human understanding or the limit of the human understanding. It is more than that. And then we have Vishnu. He is Hindu god. He is incarnated as Krishna, who is known as the sustainer. We know that in Mahabharata, in our Bhagavad Gita, it was Krishna, the charioteer, who was explaining to Arjuna why he has to do his dharma. And then we have our yajna. It is a Sanskrit word for compiler, for sacrifice rather, because our compiler is Vyasa, the name of our poet. So you see, our yajna is expected of us as well. In this time when everyone is taxed, where everyone is almost vexed, where everyone is having a hard time, we have to give a part of ourselves as a sacrifice to the world so that we could have a better world. And then we have our yoga. This is the Hindu practice of meditation and mental discipline. As they put it, when we could control our minds, we could also control those which can hurt us and those which make us happy. So the control or the choice in the end falls completely on us. I hope our video is able to help you understand and appreciate Bhagavad Gita and Mahabharata a little bit more. I also hope that through this video, it had helped you see that the choices in our lives are within our reach. And no matter how hard the world could be, it is our dharma that should tell us what we should do. And as a warrior of this world, we must always listen, or we should listen, to the spiritual guide that is given to us. With this, I hope you would have a very good day. And at the same time, you already have liked and subscribed our channel. It would be deeply appreciated if you would also share this video. Take care, everyone.